Welcome to the closing session for the Race to Zero Transport Dialogue. My name is Mariana Panuncio-Feldman. I am Senior Director for International Climate Cooperation for World Wildlife Fund. And it's an honor to be with you today to bring together what has been an amazing set of conversations today as part of the Race to Zero November Dialogues with a focus, as you know, on transport today. It has been an amazing day. I have to say the sessions from today's Transport Day have ranged from light road vehicles, trucking, shipping, and aviation. We've had a wide array of perspectives from national and subnational governments, from business, from investors, from non-governmental organizations. And what I thought was amazing was that the conversations got pretty specific as we heard from how the decarbonization of the transport sector is starting to take shape with voices from Asia, from Africa, Latin America, Europe, and North America. So the purpose of today's closing session is for us to step back from these multiple conversations that took place today and discuss the key takeaways. And more importantly, as we close this year and move into 2021, how we take all of the amazing experiences, lessons that have been shared today, and together we move decisively to bring more of them to fruition in the run-up to COP26. So in order for us to do this, we are honored to have a set of distinguished speakers today with us. We will first hear opening remarks from Ms. Carolina Schmidt, Minister of the Environment of Chile. We will then have a discussion with four distinguished panelists who will masterfully weave some of the key takeaways from all of the sessions today into an effort of synthesis that can inform our work moving forward. After we hear from the panel, we will have the opportunity to ask some questions of the panelists. So in addition to listening to the panelists, please, we'll invite you to share questions and we'll be able to select a subset that we will then turn to the panelists. I will turn to the panelists and ask them. And then finally, we're going to hear closing remarks from the high-level champions of COP26 and COP25. So we have a wonderful hour set up for us. And without further ado, I would like to begin with the opening remarks of Minister Schmidt, who has kindly pre-recorded a message for today's closing session.
Dear ministers, authorities, and friends, global warming is the most important challenge we face as a generation. Fighting it decisively is an ethical imperative. Collaboration between parties and non-party stakeholders is essential to promote ambition and action in the global race to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 at the latest, as requested by science. COVID-19 has postponed COP26, but it has not delayed the need for parties to deliver on their commitments under the Paris Agreement. Most importantly, the submission of more ambitious NDCs this year, 2020. Updating NDCs is not an unnecessary distraction from the pandemic. On the contrary, new updated NDCs can be the blueprint for a sustainable and durable economic recovery from this pandemic. NDCs offer a key framework for unlocking vast investment and job creation opportunities in the ever-expanding green sectors, from renewable generation and energy efficiency to electromobility and nature-based solutions. The economic and environmental and social benefits are vast. The Climate Ambition Alliance is our platform to drive NDC momentum forward and lay the foundations for a new blueprint of truly climate-compatible development. As we move forward to COP26, Chile and the United Kingdom will continue to work closely together. We call all parties for a greater climate ambition, in particular through the submission of new NDCs as well as long-term climate strategies ahead of the Climate Ambition Summit on 12 December this year. The Chilean COP25 presidency has also actively championed the role of transport in domestic ambition, committing to decarbonize 100% of our public transport by 2040. We already have more than 700 electric buses operating in our country, making Santiago the city with the most electric buses in the world outside of China. And we are adding more to this fleet thanks to the innovative financial model that allowed us to finance these buses with the savings we have in the operational cost in comparison with the diesel buses. So innovation, clear goals, and the involvement of non-state actors can make a big change in our race to zero before 2050. So let us all come together, states, region, businesses, local governments, universities, and others, to commit to a more sustainable, resilient, and just future with clean and smart transport system for all at its heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you again to the Minister of Chile for sharing both what Chile is doing already on transport as an example for the world, as well as inviting us all to really join in this journey together. So now let me turn to our panel session. I'm honored to be joined today by four representatives. The first one, Mr. Herald Ruijters, Director of the European Commission's Directorate General for Mobility and Transport. Thank you very much for being here with us today from the European Union. Second, we'll have Mr. Shomik Mehndiratta, Practice Manager for Transport in South Asia at the World Bank. Welcome. We also have Mr. Jamie Heywood, who's Regional General Manager for the United Kingdom, Northern and Eastern Europe at Uber. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have Ms. Maruxa Cardama, Secretary General for SLOCAT, the Partnership on Sustainable Low Carbon Transport. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I would like to start with you, Mr. Ruijters, and step back, for a second and reflect on the transformation that is taking place in Europe. The European Union has laid out quite ambitious climate goals, which are an inspiration to Europe and the world. Help us understand what this means for transport. How will transport have to evolve in Europe to meet the goals that have been laid out?
Thank you very much. And dear the ministers, colleagues, dear friends, it's a pleasure and an honor to speak here tonight and to evoke this very important theme, of course, taking it from the Paris Agreement into the main theme for the new Commission of Ursula von der Leyen, the Green Deal, that was put forward at the beginning of the new mandate. And that has been now translating also in her first speech of the Union on the 16th of September with a climate target plan. and thereby translating Paris into a concrete engagement of reducing by 2030 55%. And transport will have to deliver its part. And I'm very honored that I can represent Commissioner Adina Valian here, who is going to publish on the 9th, or is expected to publish on the 9th of December, a new strategy for a sustainable and smart mobility. And that strategy will have, of course, then to be translated into concrete measures over the year 2021 and the years thereafter to deliver this 55% of reduction in CO2 emissions. And we are going to do so in 3 blocks in 2021. And I'm happy to, of course, translate that into a concrete action, which is, first of all, in the beginning of the year, possibly in February, an action targeting 2 very difficult transport sectors, which are maritime and air, where we will come forward with proposals to refuel the aviation sector and to fuel the maritime sector. These are sectors known, of course, also in world terms, to be absolutely critical for the decarbonization of transport, and therefore these measures will come first at the start of the year. They will be immediately followed by a package that we expect around June of 2021, in which we will have a whole, I would say, series of proposals. One which is dealing with alternative fuels infrastructure, and it will be going together with CO2 emissions legislation, with Renewable Energy Directive, and with the Energy Taxation Directive. And these 4 form the core block of measures that should help that citizens and businesses can make the choices that will allow to decarbonize. Very often today, you will hear the criticism that there may be cars, trucks and so forth available, but that the infrastructure will not allow to circulate. And so who is going to go first? And this question will be tackled. We will not allow this question to perdure. There will be, of course, a layout of infrastructure necessary for recharging across Europe in a fully interoperable and transparent manner, where clients can know where they can recharge, that they can pay as easily as today with their credit cards, and that they can have no doubt that they can circulate throughout the whole of the Union. And this, of course, has to be very much in sync with the legislation that can be there, and we already have today on CO2 emissions of cars, tailpipe, but also on the well-to-wheel approaches that are more represented in the Renewable Energy Directive. And this sector integration between transport and the energy sector is key to deliver on the decarbonization of transport. And the third block that I was mentioning is a block that is linked to this second one, which is the geographical rollout. So we are not only going to impose which types of fuels, alternative fuels, need to be rolled out everywhere in all the member states, but also where and how to get there is via a revision of the trans-European networks, via a revision of the rail freight corridors, via a revision of the NIADES program for inland waterways, and via also efficiency measures that can be tackled through digitalization in our ITS legislation. So all of these are very closely knit together, because you cannot get to the 55 and ultimately to the full decarbonization in 2050 if you are not targeting each of the transport modes individually, but also to target this conjunctively together with our energy colleagues and with our DG Klima or environmental colleagues. Because of course we are now talking a lot about CO2, and I've been talking about that, but we also need to see the SOx, the NOx and the particulates. And so we also have to address all those environmental questions at the same time. And so the Commission is working very, very hard in a very joined up manner to deliver on the Paris Agreement by translating it and accelerating it, and to make sure that we can also be a front runner in the world through our actions. And I think that the different packages will allow to see that across the board. We are therefore, I would say, determined to make this happening. In fact, there is no choice. I don't see any other choice than deliver on this. And it will be quite a tough package that we will put on the table, but we hope that all the member states in the European Parliament will be with us to implement such a package, and that we are not going to be stuck on discussions whether we are still needing this. I think that there is rather a very clear view from the Commission side, under the lead of von der Leyen, Timmermans and Vălean, that this is a clear choice that has to be made now, and we will be doing so in these steps in the strategy in December, and then in the packages of February, June and September. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not only did you give us a vision of how the transport sector will evolve and reorient itself to support the delivery of the European Union's ambitious climate goals, but I think you walked us through the priority areas in a very clear way. I was wondering briefly, Mr. Ruijters, whether I was really struck by one element that you mentioned, which is, well, there were many things in there, but I'll pick one, which is making it easier for companies and different actors to choose the right thing. So how do we facilitate the transition with the right support infrastructure? So I was wondering briefly whether you could come back to that element, this question of facilitating choice and the role that the strategy that you're going to lay out has in doing so.
Yes, thank you for that very good question. In fact, of course, the amount of energy needed is quite huge. And even if we decarbonize entirely, there will have to be made choices. For instance, for inland transport, let's say cars, vans, trucks, ultimately, we think that the decarbonization will be done through electrification, and both by full electric battery, but also by hydrogen. And perhaps even there will be some other developments. We see, for instance, also solar battery and so forth. So that will definitely be a clear choice with a number of options to road transport. But the choices will be more difficult if we go to maritime or air transport. And in air transport, for instance, there will be no possibilities for certain segments to make use of a full width of choices. It will be e-fuels, most certainly, obtained, for instance, through hydrogen processes. And the amounts that we have available are limited. And the same is true also for biofuels. You hear a lot about the different types of biofuels that will be available. It would not be wise to spend those limited amounts on transport modes that have a variety of choices. So possibly these biofuels will have to be used for those transport modes where it will be quite difficult to decarbonize. For instance, maritime, or also on the short run, air transport once again. And so the Commission is quite well aware about these kind of things. We need to translate that to the market, to our customers, but also to the producers, hence the sector integration. And we need to make sure that these things fit, so that we don't get a situation where, in fact, we are wasting very scarce resources. Hence also the efficiencies that we need to achieve in the overall system. Otherwise, we are not going to get there. But there are other sectors which need to decarbonize as well, like households, industry, and so forth. So we are aware of those choices to be made.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, the ability not to create unintended effects, right? And knowing that there will need to be allocation, I think is very important. Thank you very much. This was a great opening for our conversation. Embedded in these initial reflections for the European Union, it is clear that we need all actors that in some way engage in the sector, really rowing in the same direction and really each playing their part. I wanted to turn to Mr. Mehndiratta. Thank you very much for being with us today, to share with us some of the insights on the World Bank's investment and funding strategies. I mean, clearly, not just having an integral strategy, but also being able to direct finance to really provide the right incentives to accelerate the process is critical. Can you tell us how what is the role of investors and of investment and funding strategies in ensuring that the transport sector moves at the pace and the scale required?
Mariana, thanks. Happy to, pleasure and an honor to be here. Look, at the moment, my remit is South Asia. So I will talk in terms of South Asia, though what I say is probably as relevant outside and across the countries that the World Bank works in. Look, in South Asia, which is kind of, I would almost say India plus, you know, ranging from Afghanistan to Bangladesh, the 8 countries. In this area, we are in most places a relatively small part of the total investment that a country takes. I mean, in India, all of the World Bank across all sectors, that's about 3 billion, 4 billion a year, and you know the country invests 100. So, and that's even more true in transport, you know, in terms of shares. So our role is to be a catalyst, to try and make change, to facilitate change in different ways. Now, what I'd say is that the way we are looking at decarbonization in South Asia is what I would call a all of the above strategy, where we have frameworks that I think the world agrees on, the avoid, shift, improve kind of framework. And if you think of cities and you think of freight, in both, we are active and supporting with a combination of policy dialogue, policy work, and direct financing move towards decarbonization. Let's talk briefly about cities. In cities, you know, sort of the core of our program is supporting public transport development, walking, cycling, and planning from a TOD kind of perspective. And a good example is a partnership we are developing with the city of Chennai, one of the big metropolitan cities in India, where they are investing along with other MDBs in a range of metro projects, for instance, and they have suburban rail, they have buses. And what we are supporting through our program is a combination of focusing on walking and last mile cycling, which is kind of critical to make any of this work, as well as getting a bus program institutionalized and integration across modes, and then metropolitan governance. And you know, that's a nice example. Another nice example is a project we're working on in India on intermodal passenger facilities, which really brings different entities, railways, which are sometimes at the national level, state government organizations and local government organizations together to talk and share space and build space in a way that actually the markets can finance. Again, to go in where no one usually can break the silos. We're doing BRTs in India, in Karachi. We're doing lots of different kinds of these urban mobility projects. And I'll just leave that thought with saying that metropolitan governance is a great barrier to effective urban mobility in South Asia, and is something that we all need to work on. We are, of course, doing a lot on electric mobility. What we are trying to do is to see how we can support markets. In India, in particular, that you know, the 2- and 3-wheeler segments, bus segments, important segments where total cost of ownership is about the same. And we are looking at working with our energy colleagues and the markets to create funds which will buy down the risk for banks to lend to entities to go electric, especially in the 2- and 3-wheeler space. Talk very briefly about freight, and then I'll stop. Look, we are doing a lot to support railways and inland waterways. We are financing directly with about $2 billion the Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor in India that will create the space really for the most, I hope, modern and facility that will start taking some traffic off the Indian roads. And we are supporting inland waterways, both in India and Bangladesh, with some of the same goal. But, let's face it, all the rail and all the inland waterways in the world are still going to leave close to 90% of domestic freight to be carried by trucks. And we are starting to do more and more on trucking, not so much from a technology perspective, but really to see how we can take an industry which is informal, which is often, bottom of the barrel, undercapitalized, fragmented, to becoming more organized, to see what are the structural impediments to formalizing this industry. Because formalization brings the prospect of newer, better, bigger, and most importantly, fuller trucks. The US has 13% of their trucks running empty. India has 45. So, you bring that down, you start heading towards decarbonization faster than almost even technologies can do. So that gives you a sense of what we're doing. Let me stop here. One can go on
Thank
forever.
you. Thank you. No, I mean, fascinating. And as, in terms of some of the examples that you were providing, I could hear some of the themes from previous sessions today, from the importance of cities planning and the importance of addressing metropolitan governance to this question of how do we tailor the solutions to the modes of transportation that make more sense, but also this need to think about land, maritime, in this case, with the examples that you provided, that integration in modes of transport in a way that will give us more efficiencies. Given what you said, which is one of the issues that I wake up thinking about a lot, which is this question of how do we break the silos? Can you tell us very briefly just one or two examples of innovative ways of financing transport decarbonization, particularly at the national and local level, that can really help us accelerate by breaking these silos. I think that would be interesting. And if you have any thoughts on the international climate change dedicated funds, but even if you focus on the first one, that would be
I would prefer actually starting with talking about these international funds, because I wake up in the morning worrying about the absence of financing that can accelerate these movements. Look, in countries in South Asia, while there is a strong commitment to Paris, you cannot blame them for focusing first and foremost on their own development needs. Now, as it happens in cities, and when it comes to public transport and freight, when it comes to rail and all of the issues we've been talking about, there's a very nice alignment between what is good for the countries and in their own interests, very selfishly, and what is good for the climate. And that's the space which we inhabit. But if you want to push and if you want to accelerate, then new sources of financing are critical. And let me tell you, for transport, that's not been easy. That's not been easy. CDM, as we all know, just did not work for transport. It is not to say there are no projects at all. I mean, Bogota got some, and a couple of other cities were able to make some things work, but the structural problems with the CDM just did not let transport access CDM. And of the other funds, the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, has given some important money to help transform elements of the transport systems, especially in India and across Latin America. But those have been small money for institutions and capacity building, not for financing infrastructure. And GCF, which is the key game in town at the moment, I have to say has been a tough slog. We are trying at the moment to work with GCF in Bhutan, where the country is very keen to showcase itself as a green symbol, but it's very difficult to get. It's very all the problems that you can imagine and more. So I really hope that as we go into the COP, that greater minds than myself are really focusing on how to open up financing and climate financing for transport. And I hope people are going to be able to think of, for example, endowment-based approaches rather than project-based approaches. I think we have to move away from project-based approaches, but create kind of stable streams of money with the which is possible with the endowment-based approach that give countries the incentive to start accelerating this issue. Look, on top of that, when you talk about national and local level, I don't think there are any easy solutions, Mariana. I think what we are trying to do more so than anything else is go back to first principles and seeing if we can build the fundamentals that allow cities in some stages or organizations to access markets. So to provide the funding streams that are stable and that are transparent, that allow financing from the markets. There's a lot of money in the markets if you can, hedge the risks. So we are moving increasingly into a guarantee-based product rather than just straight financing. But for a guarantee to make sense, the agencies, whether it's a metropolitan area or whether it's a particular organization, has to have the right governance and has to put together funding streams that make sense. That's where we are going. Let me stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think once again, I think that with your reflections coming from the Asia region, I can see echoing of earlier conversations of today and your call. I think that the call to all of the bright minds to unlock greater finance at scale for what is needed, while helping provide the guarantees at a national and local scale to be able to access sustainable streams of finance, to be able to make the transformations not just through short-term projects, but a longer-term investment, I think are critical. Thank you very much, Mr. Mehndiratta. I would now like to turn to Mr. Heywood and actually help us look into the opportunities of the world is changing right before our eyes. And I think Uber, as all of the other platform-based new ways of connecting customers has shown us what the power of technology and transport, can do in helping accelerate the decarbonization of the transport sector. So can you tell us about the role of Uber as this linkages of technology and transportation services continue to evolve? Like, how can Uber help in this, taking advantage of the latest?
Mariana, thank you for the question, and thank you also to the forum and all of the sponsors for the intro. I mean, we're very conscious that this is a global problem that we need to collectively fix, and Uber's completely committed to playing its role in fixing it. And I think there's two reasons why we're convinced. The first one is that transport accounts for around a quarter of global emissions, as we've heard over today. And whilst in many other sectors emissions have shrunk from their sectors, in transport it's grown by 30%. And we're also conscious that as Uber in the EU, we help over 400. We operate at scale. We help over 400,000 drivers provide trips to 33 million riders a year. So we're operating at a scale where a significant proportion of that responsibility accrues to us. So in terms of answering the question, I'm actually very optimistic that technology can play a role in helping cities solve the problem of decarbonizing transport. For us, the future of mobility is going to be more shared, more electric, and more active. So technology allows us to make mobility a service that people consume only when they need it, not an asset that sits in their driveway unused for 95% of the time. And the key thing here is that actually technology can drive utilization and utilization unlocks the investments required to invest in electrification. So let me talk a bit about some of those things. So in the area of shared, obviously, the more people you get in a vehicle, the greater your utilization, and the less carbon is emitted per passenger kilometer traveled. So we're doing a few things in that area. Firstly, we have a shared rides product, which means that we are using technologies to try and match riders going in the same direction to try and put more people into a given vehicle. The average vehicle in, say, London travels around with only 1.2 people in it. So, that means there's usually 3 empty seats that can be filled. And if you can fill that, that's good for riders, that's good for drivers who will earn more, and that's good for the environment. So Uber Pool, which is our shared rides product, accounted for up to 20% of trips in the cities where it operated. Obviously, we've shut that down during COVID, but we're looking forward to a time when we can reopen them. Also, with encouraging shared transportation, we've integrated transit, so tube and bus, into the app in many cities. In London now, we offer a full bus schedule and a full tube schedule to make sure that riders have a choice about which mode, and they understand the associated costs and timings of the different modes before they make a choice. So that's more shared. If I turn to the second of the pillars, more active. So we've already got Jump and Lime e-bikes on our app in many cities. And what we're trying to do now is create ways where riders can weave active transport into a journey that includes many modes. So we're looking forward to launching Jump, Lime, and other bikes going forward. The third one is electric, and how we make our rides more electric. And one of the key challenges to electrification of the vehicle is that the investment returns only make sense when actually, if you're driving quite a lot during a day. So effectively, the economics of an electric vehicle are you pay slightly more upfront, but the running costs are lower. And so the interesting thing there is actually it makes sense first for high mileage drivers, for drivers who drive quite a lot, where the benefits you get from lower running costs pay back the higher increased costs that you have up front. And that happens first for high mileage drivers like PHV or taxi drivers. So actually, we've been working very hard to build clean air funds in some of the cities where we operate. In London, we've raised over £120 million to support drivers in moving from ICE vehicles to electric vehicles. We have partnerships with BP to try and reduce the cost of charging and improve charging infrastructure, partnerships with Nissan and Hyundai. And also we've committed to launching Uber Green, where we give riders the choice of choosing a fully electric vehicle. At the moment, it's in over 30 cities, and we should be in over 60 cities by the end of the year. And these are some of the very sort of on-the-ground, tactical things that we're doing. But when you add it all up, it does get significant. So we've committed recently in September this year that 50% of our trips will be electric in the EU by 2025 across 7 European capitals. And that 100% of our trips in the EU will be fully electric by 2030. And we want to work with cities who want to bring in the right kind of legislation, be that congestion charging legislation or EV zones, so we can actually bring that forward. And if any city brings together, we think, the right policies, we're willing to commit to be fully electric in that city within 5 years of those policies going live.
That's wonderful. Mr. Heywood, thank you. I thought it was, well, you said a lot of very interesting reflections on how, this relationship between transport, between sharing and how that can accelerate. And actually it's even helps in the process of promoting electrification, because actually as we share, we can have more mileage in those cars, which is a win-win. And I also thought, and thank you for this, of showing what the private sector can do if local governments provide the right point to the right ambition, how the private sector can align with that ambition and then actually accelerate the process. I am mindful of our time, and so I want to thank you for for your reflections, and move to Maruxa, who actually has been tracking the conversations all of today. And I would like Maruxa to ask you if you can help us step back and identify some of the priority areas that have emerged from today, some of which have been shared by our panelists today, areas that at the core require more collaboration, among stakeholders, for us to reach our common goals. So what are those areas? What would you highlight from today's conversations?
Thanks very much, Mariana, and thanks to the all fellow panelists. It's a bit of a difficult task, but I'm going to try to stay, within time and to keep it just to some thoughts, because there'll be a proper report about this wonderful day. So I'm going to highlight 9 without any intention of covering the entirety of things, but I'm going to try to highlight 9. And I'm going to start by aligning the ambition of countries in terms of decarbonization across land transport, shipping and aviation. That would be the first one. The second area in which there is still work to do amongst different stakeholders is releasing our economies from fossil fuel subsidies. A third action could be supporting decision makers across the entire value chain to understand the environmental, the social, and the economic cost of inaction if we don't curb the growing emissions of this transport sector, but equally supporting the same decision makers to better understand the economies of scale and the cost reductions that are associated to transport decarbonization, both for the private sector and their operations, and also in terms of public expenditure in other areas, like, for instance, health. A fifth area for further collaboration amongst all of us is that one about establishing consistent regulatory frameworks and investment frameworks. And people might ask, what for? Well, for a series of things: to accelerate investment in resilient low carbon transport infrastructure, including sound attention to public transport and to walking and cycling; to speed up the transformation of the business models in the era of transport electrification. Yes, indeed, it is the end of the internal combustion engine and it is not reversible. Equally, to unleash technology solutions at scale. We talked about clean, renewable energy-based electrification and non-fossil fuel solutions across land transport, maritime, and aviation. And equally, consistent regulatory and investment frameworks to reach the full alignment of policy and investment with Paris goals. And that includes as well official development assistance we heard throughout the day. And that includes as well exports of second-hand vehicles to the global south. It's something that we also heard throughout the day. But that takes me to 5 areas, and I said that I had identified 9. So let's continue. A 6th area for a bit better cooperation between different stakeholders is balanced attention to both passenger and freight transportation systems, which is not equally regarded in many different countries. A 7th area would be the challenge of optimizing and customizing intermodality. There is a lot of win-wins there in terms of emissions and also in terms of costs of operations. 8th is metropolitan governance. It's just been mentioned, metropolitan governance, basically enabling governments at different levels to do what they are good at and making sure that these different levels of government work together, which is also all about connectivity and access to transport across rural and urban areas. And 9th, last but not least, is accountable monitoring frameworks, which we know is an overarching goal of any climate framework at the global or at the national level, basically checking against delivery. So those are 9. Of course, they are not covering the entirety of the discussions, but there are 9 areas that then could be broken down in a lot of further cooperation amongst the stakeholders.
Oh, Maruxa, you have the very, very challenging task of trying to synthesize. And I thought, definitely some of the topics that you touched on were mentioned by our panelists today. And so I think that there are some emergent themes. The big question, the million-dollar question is, how do we take this forward, Maruxa? Like, what would you say, what are your key takeaways in terms of moving this forward in the run-up to COP26? Of course, this is worth a longer conversation, but if you had to say, what would you bet on? What would it be?
Let me try again without honoring the richness of the discussions, perhaps extract 6 takeaways that I think cut across all the sessions of the day. And what are the messages that we take to COP out of those takeaways that we've heard? So takeaway 1. Well, anybody joining us today in the middle of the day could have thought that we were in a dialogue about energy or health or industry and jobs or resilience or cities. And actually we were in a dialogue about transport. That is the strength of transport and its potential for transformation and climate action, the long supply and demand chains that are characteristic of our sector, the action by different levels of government, the public and private partnerships that revolve around both passenger and freight transportation systems, the behavioral change in mobility modes for each of us as citizens, the fact that accessible, efficient, and reliable transport is as much about climate action as it is about equity and social justice. These nodes actually carry a groundswell of systemic transformation across the different socioeconomic systems of our societies by the hand of transport decarbonization. So message to COP, the transport sector is a great example of multi-stakeholder collaboration, yet there is a lot of further collaboration to be unleashed. So that would be message 1. Message 2, the avoid, shift and improve framework. It's been mentioned just a minute ago by some of our fellow panelists here. It's a critical framework as ever in order to really enable integrated and balanced approaches to transport decarbonization, avoiding unnecessary trips by placemaking policies that are based on proximity and on accessibility, avoiding, of course, motorized trips as well, shifting away from the private vehicle to public transport, to shared mobility, to water-based freight solutions, to cargo bikes for last mile deliveries, and of course, improving vehicle design and fuel efficiency. So message to COP, we need parties to implement nationally determined contributions and long-term climate strategies that embrace transport decarbonization and enable the full benefits of the avoid, shift and improve framework. And this is really the time for fully aligning the investment portfolios and the pandemic recovery packages with Paris objectives. Transport decarbonization measures are going to be essential for green, equitable recovery. Takeaway 3, there are tangible progress and opportunity happening across the different regions of the world. We've heard today how Asia is focusing on strides towards the decarbonization of freight solutions. Africa, we heard about how they focus on the fundamental resilient infrastructure needs. We heard from Latin America how they harness tactical urbanism and public transport, while the electrification of transport is really picking up speed in the region. Message to COP, we must enable transport solutions that are adapted, cost efficient for the different realities of different geographies and different countries. Another message number 4, heavy transport sectors are really rallying around decarbonization pathways. Blueprints are being launched to develop, to trial, to accelerate technology solutions and the adoption of zero emission technologies in the next 5 to 10 years across road transportation, shipping and aviation. The zero emission vehicle campaign of COP26 provides a unique opportunity to accelerate the race to zero in road transport. So message to COP, a very simple one: scale up, scale up, scale up. And now I'm coming to the last 2 messages. Takeaway 5, the face of the transport sector is changing and its ecosystem is changing. Message to COP, the change can happen at a wider scale and at a much faster pace when we all come together, when governments, when private sector, when civil society and academia fulfill their respective roles and engage in really radical cooperation. And last but not least, takeaway 6, there is a generation of young leaders out there. They are our guiding light. They boldly reimagine business models, investment, political leadership, knowledge generation, activism for transport decarbonization. They fully understand the urgency of curbing the emissions of a sector that is not on track, and they are really keeping us accountable against our promises. Message to COP, a very simple one. We just need to have the courage of following that guiding light of our young transport decarbonization leaders and harness the unprecedented disruption that these challenging times are bringing us for going faster, farther and deeper into carbon decarbonization, transport decarbonization. So that's a bit like a very quick, fast and furious wrap up of what we heard throughout the day. But let me take a moment, if you don't mind, Mariana, and in the interest of time, to say a few thank yous. It's imperative. I think it is imperative to thank the fellow speakers and the moderators, my fellow speakers here, and you, and all those who've been with us today throughout 12 hours of a marathon to bring all their intellectual generosity today. I also want to thank the participants. It's been remarkable. Some of the sessions had more than 12,000 people watching live. And this just adds up to the momentum that's been generated since Monday on social media when the kickoff of the Race to Zero dialogues occurred. There's been over 48 million outreach on Twitter, over 300 million impressions on Twitter since Monday. That's quite something. But my thanks have also got to go for the institutional partners with whom we've been putting this together. And behind the transport dialogue, there's been a huge collaboration effort among the United Nations high-level climate action champions, the International Transport Forum, the SLOCAT Partnership on Sustainable Low Carbon Transport, Mission Possible Platform, the World Economic Forum, the Global Maritime Forum, ICAO, the Climate Group, the Said Business School and Oxford University, the Resilient 40, and also a special thanks to the Smart Freight Center, UN Habitat, the International Association of Public Transport, UITP, and the GIZ, who have also partnered with us in the regional sessions. It's been a remarkable day. Thanks to all. Back to you, Mariana. Thank you.
Thank you, Maruxa. Just in that list that you just shared, you showed the power of collaboration, that if we really all collectively put our minds to it, we have a tremendous opportunity, to make progress faster together. I am mindful of our time, and we actually have closing remarks from our two high-level champions who are honoring us with their presence today. We know they've been very coveted, given that they've been engaging in so many sector-specific conversations. We've had some questions from the audience, which we have shared with the panelists, but given the time, I think we're going to have to hold off on asking those questions and leave them as points of reflection for each of our panelists. Instead, then, what I would like is to turn to the two high-level champions, to Nigel Topping, high-level champion for COP26, to be then followed by Gonzalo Munoz, high-level champion for COP25, to take on what you've heard from the panelists and actually take on Maruxa's specific calls for COP26, and help us now take the torch forward. What have you heard? How does this line up with the climate action pathways that have, with your leadership, so many institutions have contributed to? How do we take this forward so that we make COP26 a pivoting point for transport and for so many other sectors?
Oh, should I start, Nigel?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
That's a big question.
Hard one. Yeah.
Maruxa's already done a great job of summarizing the trend.
Incredible. How can we replicate that? Oh, yeah. Thanks so much, Mariana and Maruxa. This has been incredible. And through that, of course, I don't want to repeat all of the institutions that you named, Maruxa. To all of them, a big thank you, very especially to SLOCAT, the International Transport Forum, Mission Possible Platform, the World Economic Forum. This has been incredible, and definitely this helps so much to set the path towards the total decarbonization of the transport system globally as part of what we're working around this net zero, this race to zero emissions by 2050 and 80s. You probably, everybody here listening to the session and following the day might know. And if you don't know it, you should know now that this is the topic that has been in the forefront of the work that Nigel has been doing for all of his career, right? So I also want to thank you, my friend, and through you to the amazing group of people that have been part of this trajectory, of course, including women business. And one of the most exciting moments and results that we are seeing is from today's discussion is that we are seeing the real possibility of having markets committed to 100% zero emissions vehicles by 2035 as an absolute feasible dream, right? And I know how much you have been putting not only dream ideas, tears and sweat into that topic. So thank you, because I think that through you, I just want to thank and celebrate the work of so many people for so many years. And this is so important because it marks the end of the internal combustion engine with all what that means, right? It's not just about one technology. It's about how much of that will allow us to progress in so many other ways into the total decarbonization of our society, right? And we have heard today on how much of this is being driven also through civil society. We have heard from car manufacturers, fleet owners, policymakers. I think that probably for all of us listening from a politician like Governor from California, speaking about the 2035 phase out of fossil fuel in cars and vans, is definitely something that it's not only about California, it's not about the US, it's about how much of that is setting again the tone of this race, of this potential positive competition of other markets like the UK, China, or some other cities and regions around the world, also trying to surpass that trajectory. And that's what it's all about. I mean, we are now in a positive race of the best potential expression of competition, right? So in that sense, we've heard also, and speaking about the achievements of EV100, we've seen new additions to EV100 today, Wilmot Dixon joining, and that again, as expressions of how much of this is gaining momentum. I personally was also very well, I mean, I was celebrating the launch of the Getting to Zero Coalition Blueprint for large-scale system demonstration project in shipping. As you know, like the decarbonization of the shipping and the maritime industry is critical for all countries, but very especially for countries like Chile, like mine, right, where we depend on global trading, and we just cannot rely on putting our let's say zero emission products into the docks. We need a system that will take those products fully decarbonized into the final markets. So I'm really excited of having heard so many, not only members of the Getting to Zero Coalition, but also the number of freight purchases that are also signing up to Race to Zero. I'm also very excited of the possibility of so many financial systems aligning with all of this. So what do you think about all of this? What represents for the transport sector globally? Well,
I want to come back to Mariana's question about the road to COP, because I think first of all, I want to echo the thanks to everybody, but also, you know, remember we called these the Race to Zero dialogues, and okay, we've been banging on about the Race to Zero since we launched it in June, and it is a race, and we need to get to zero. And actually, Maruxa, I think we might want to rethink avoid shift improve, and maybe it needs to be avoid shift zero. I think the word improve doesn't have enough urgency in it. I think the framing is really helpful, right? There's three different approaches, but I think, as you said, we know that zero is possible, and it has to be part of our framing. So, but I think that, you know, one of the keys of a dialogue, I said this in the youth session earlier, is a dialogue is different from a debate. You know, debate etymologically comes from the same word that gives you batter, to beat. Debate is a confrontation. It's my idea is better than yours. I'll tell you why. And we're taught to think like that and to argue like that. We're really serious about the need for dialogue. So dialogue is a space where you respectfully listen to others. You don't have to agree, right? You don't have to come out with one answer. You're allowed to disagree intelligently and respectfully. But so that space of listening is crucial, because we are talking about the you know, and Maruxa, you've described it beautifully. This is about radical collaboration. It's about supply side, demand side, city policymakers, national policymakers, investors, civil society, all coming together. So I think all of these dialogues are starting to illustrate that in a really live way, because we have, you know, the European, the EU, and Uber, and civil society, and youth, and so that's life, right? It's not all politics or all civil society or all private sector. It's a messy mix, and so we need to get the messy mix in the room. And it's about technology, and it's about people. So it's about the end of the combustion engine, and it's about more active mobility. So, and it's always more nuanced. And I think also we're hearing this real sense of, I think, a growing self-belief, right? We talk about exponential change and S curves, and engineers, policymakers, civil society are endlessly creative. We have the power to imagine new worlds and then build them, and we're hearing that from all sectors now. And that's at the heart of the pathways that we're publishing with this amazing community of the Marrakesh partnership. So I want to come back to Gonzalo's question on shipping. Look, we see it now, all of those levers being activated. We see shipping manufacturers committing to buying ammonia-ready ships only from 2025. We have this development pathway of getting to zero. We have growing commitments around the hydrogen infrastructure, so we can have the ammonia infrastructure. All those things are coming together. Same with aviation. We're hearing about short-haul electric flights by 2030s. The One World Alliance. I spoke at the ICAO stocktake, and I was trying to be pushy and say, you guys have got to commit to net zero 2050 or you'll lose your license to operate. And then the CEO of the One World Alliance, 13 of the world's airlines, 12.4% of the world's flights, says, yeah, we're committed to net zero 2050. So I was like, oh, that's good. That's the fastest cause and effects of my rant ever. And we're now seeing this converge. This is the crucial bit, right? It's not just the end goal commitment. It's what are the concrete steps that we can converge around the next 5 years. So we're seeing this convergence around 2% sustainable aviation fuel by 2025, 10% by 2030. And when every airline, every airport, every fuel manufacturer, every buyer of air tickets and air freight commits to that pathway, then it de-risks it for everybody. The costs can get distributed and we can go much faster. So I'm really excited about the way this dialogue process is unlocking these pathways. And that's what we want to take to COP26 in Glasgow, is the fruition of these pathways and these dialogues is a critical mass of every sector showing up in Glasgow, supply side, demand side, investors, policymakers, civil society saying, we're committed to getting to zero along this pathway. And if you're not on that pathway by the time we get to Glasgow, you've committed to losing. Whether it's a mayor, you're not going to get re-elected because all your citizens are going to see that other mayors are getting there, or a CEO, your shareholders are going to tell you, why are you behind the curve? So I think that's what we're trying to create together with all of you on the road to Glasgow. Gonzalo, I've gone totally off script. Follow that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to take like one other aspect that you mentioned that we heard during the day, and was, I would say, the tone from the youth, and it's something that I think we have to celebrate, because many times the youth is perceived as they are like just confronting, and I think that what we saw today was a lesson on how to respectfully provoke and ask for more ambition, because they are not only part of the, I mean, they are running a high risk, but they are also willing to be part of those solutions. So I really think that it was a kind of expression of how much things are changing exponentially, and how much of the changes we're seeing during a critical year like this one, setting also this new tone. I have to recognize, like, learning from the youth on how to set the correct type of dialogue.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that one other element that I would like to bring to this wrap-up session is about what we heard in the last panel on the need of not only establishing intermodal system, integrating efficient public sector, electromobility, walking, cycling, and micromobility as one of the challenges that we're facing during this year, but also as how much of that has been part of the need of countries to design the way to build back better, and how much of that is totally related to how to plan our cities in a proper way, in a much better way. There have been so many changes, behavioral changes during this year, that all of that should be properly packed in this, let's say, months where we will be seeing the recovery plans. So that should be part of what we take directly to Nigel, and also quite connected to the potential of the green hydrogen to be part of all of the decarbonization. So everything that is related to aviation and shipping and the long haul trucks takes me to the connection of how much we're seeing, and we speak about that during the Energy Day, on mobilizing this new sector of the economy that will be the green, always green, hydrogen economy. Back to you, my friend. I think that we have touched a lot of topics.
And Mariana, I know you want to wrap up. Let me just say one word about tomorrow. I'm sorry, we're too excited. It's really inspiring. We've been really in listening mode.
Wonderful.
I mean, I want to just go back. I love that example from Uber. I hadn't heard that before, of that commitment. It's a nice kind of, if you implement the policies, then boom, within 5 years. So that's another example of a sort of contingent commitment, which is really nice. I think we're seeing more and more of that. Like if somebody else moves, so that it's just a way. Like we saw the same thing on this idea of like building ammonia ready ships, right? If you say you're going to build ammonia ready ships, then it incentivizes the creation of the ammonia infrastructure and the hydrogen, right? So just a last point then. So this has been fantastic. Thank you, Mariana and everybody. Tomorrow we're going to be on to some different topics. We're exploring the pathways to zero for oceans and coastal zones, and for water. So they're very different. Again, a different collection of amazing partners who we're going to learn from about how we can protect these crucial natural resources whilst fully decarbonizing the way that we interact with them. So lots of innovation. Really looking forward to it. You can tell Gonzalo and I are overexcited, really energized. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for contributing, for watching. Keep the conversation going. Keep asking the hard questions. Keep making the bold commitments, and then we'll keep building momentum so we get to Glasgow en route to net zero in the 2040s. Thank you, everybody, and see you soon. Thanks,
Thank you very much, Gonzalo and Nigel. Very much appreciated. Thank you for all of you for staying a few minutes over time, but we're all excited. We couldn't help ourselves, and I imagine you couldn't help yourself either, and you're still with us. So I just would like to close by thanking all of the panelists today and everybody who joined the Transport Day in all of the earlier sessions today. I think that as Nigel and Gonzalo reflected, what is happening right in front of our eyes is that we are shifting what is possible through the work of so many in very concrete ways, but also through us being able, with data and with experience, to really set our sights to where we need to see and imagine the path there. We are literally being able to dream more and do more. So I think we've seen this with transport today. We're seeing this with each of the dialogues that are taking place, where the operative word, I'll take it, Nigel, is and us challenging each other to go farther. So with that, I just want to leave you all. We have an exciting road ahead of us at COP26, and we look forward to working with many of you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mariana. Dream more and do more. I love that.
Thank you all. Have a great day or evening wherever you might be.